As her daughter leaves for college, scientist and decorated professor and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, writes in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, about the duty of feeding that's been such a hallmark of her experience as a mother. She writes, "There were days when I would get up in the morning and the animals had beaten me to the kitchen. The calico cat yelled from her perch, 'Feed me.' The long hair stood by his bowl silently with an accusing stare. The dog threw herself against my legs with happiness and looked expectant. 'Feed me.' And I did. I dropped handfuls of oatmeal and cranberry into one pot and stirred hot chocolate in another. The girls came downstairs sleepy-eyed and needing that homework paper from last night. 'Feed me,' they said. And I did. I tipped the scraps from the compost bucket into so when next summer's tomato seedlings say, 'Feed me,' I can. And when I kiss the girls goodbye at the door, and the horses whicker at the fence for their bucket of grain, and the chickadees call to me from their empty seed tray, 'Feed me, me, feed me, me.' The fern on the windowsill droops its fronds in silent request. And when I put the key in the ignition of the car, it starts to ping, 'Fill me,' which I do. How many of you have had a duty of feeding another that is part or once was part of your daily routine? Duties of feeding another. Parents of children and pets know this routine very well, though I think that nearly all of us either have been or will someday be responsible for feeding another, even if it's not part of our daily routine now. I know that as I wrote this sermon, my brown tabby cat, Teacup, walked her furry little body back and forth across my keyboard until she settled down right on top of my mouse. So as I was typing, it was okay, but every time I needed to use my cursor, I had to reach into her belly and underneath to click. 'Feed me,' she purred, and she looked up at me with her green eyes that always somehow remind me of my grandmother's. I realize that Teacup is the longest chosen relationship of my life. We will have been together 13 years on her adoptiversary in a couple of weeks. And for every day that we have been together, it has been my responsibility to feed her, or shared responsibility, or make sure she is fed. I calculated that that's been 4,736 days. And usually she's been fed twice a day, so I'm guessing that's like 8,500 feedings I've been responsible or partially responsible for my little cat Teacup. It's a lot to be responsible for feeding someone else, right? This most essential duty of life. 8,500 times I have needed to make time in my day to get up and put down fresh food and water for her and whatever other beings I have been responsible for at that time. There have been times when I haven't been the best mother to her, when her meal has been delayed because I've been working late or sleeping in. But in our nearly 13 years, I can only remember one time when her evening meal didn't happen at all. When I have needed to be away, I have sometimes resented all that goes into making sure that her little body is still fed and her pills are gently tucked into a pill pocket and coaxed or smashed into her mouth. There have been times that the effort of cleaning her cat hair and her litter box and whatever other messes she makes a lot of messes like that often, it's made me wonder whether it might be easier to just not be a cat mom. But there have been other times when I've wrestled with the kind of depression that makes it hard to keep moving from one task to the next. I know many of you have wrestled with that kind of depression. I remember once arriving home after grocery shopping and just sitting outside in my car, struggling to find the energy to pick myself up and go inside. The need to get the groceries in the freezer wasn't enough to get me moving that evening, and I continued to sit there as things began to de-thaw. And then the image of Teacup and my other cat at the time, Gmork, the image of them waiting for dinner up in my apartment came to me, ready to offer their headbutts and their purrs and their biscuit making on my lap as soon as they had eaten their fill. And I took a deep breath, and I took my keys out of the ignition, and I began to gather my groceries and go upstairs. Sometimes being needed by another to feed them or otherwise is what we need to get ourselves going. Our culture tends to define the act of giving as a transaction. Like, I give something to you and then I have a little bit less for myself afterwards. And it's why we're so focused on getting our money's worth, right? Because when we give, we have less of one thing, and therefore we should only give to exchange for more of something else. We think of giving and often receiving as well as some kind of balance sheet. We only give in order to receive, and when we receive, we feel an obligation to pay for what we've received, even if it was given freely to us with no strings attached. Our culture tells us giving is a transaction, and we need to be wise about making sure that we get more than we give. But anyone who has ever loved, which I know is everyone in this room and in this Zoom room, we all know that giving creates a cycle of reciprocal love that has nothing to do with the kind of balance sheet score-keeping understanding of giving and receiving. Dr. Kimmerer writes, I remember my babies at the breast, the first feeding, the long, deep suck that drew up from my innermost well, which was filled and filled and filled again by the look that passed between us, the reciprocity of mother and child. I don't think you need to have body-fed a child to know what that look is. And as her daughter left for college and she looked ahead to some new empty nest life for herself, she continues, I suppose I should welcome the freedom from all of that feeding and worrying, but I'll miss it. Maybe not the laundry, but the immediacy of those looks, the presence of our reciprocal love. It's hard to say goodbye to. In the final months of my father's life, as his brain cancer began to diminish his capacity to take care of his own basic needs, I began to visit more and more often. My big, strong, 6'2", 200-something pound father, who had held my hand and supported me when I was learning to walk, now needed my arms wrapped around him to walk around my parents' neighborhood so that he would be steady. My food-loving father, who had made countless weekend waffle breakfasts for us and homemade pizzas on Thursday nights. As my brother and I grew up, he now needed us to make food for him and eventually to help him eat it when bringing a fork to his mouth was no longer an easy thing to do. My patient father, who had changed a zillion of my own diapers, I'm sure, and cleaned up how many childhood messes I will never know that I created for him, now needed our patience as we lovingly helped to clean him and keep their home clean. Those last moments, those last months, really, of his life required so much constant care from my mother and frequent visits from me and my spouse at the time and my brother, supportive shifts from extended family and close friends of our family, so that my mother would have even more hands to help and ears to listen. And that's not even to mention the hospice care team and our minister and the neighbors who dropped off casseroles and plates of cookies. My father passed away 15 years ago now, 14 years before I had a child myself. But it's striking to me how similar the experience is of caring for a loved one about to leave this earth and caring for a loved one newly arrived to this earth. When done with the loving attention that each human life deserves, though the pressures of our modern life rarely allow for it, a birth or a crisis or a death call for a large community of people who are willing to give of themselves with no expectation of receiving anything in return. And one of the huge tragedies of COVID was that these communities were not able to gather for those who were dying, those who were sick, and those who had new babies. One of the great tragedies with our society's obsession with self-sufficiency is how rare it is, even now, even before the pandemic, for those large communities to gather. To surround the one in crisis with a sense that they're held by that capital L love that transcends individual relationships. To surround the primary caretakers in love so that they can have a little bit of relief from the massive burden that they carry. What our culture that worships self-sufficiency and looks with contempt upon those in need, our culture that is a transactional giving culture, what it misses is that we are fed by the giving, right? We are fed by the giving. What even we who seek to put our lives in service of awakening love and justice in this world forget sometimes is that when we give something important of ourselves, when we give it freely, we are not depleted. No, when we give of our hearts, we enter into this cycle of reciprocal love. Countless studies have shown that people who give of themselves, who volunteer or give their time to help friends and neighbors, even give to nonprofits whose missions matter to them, these are happier people than those who give less. One study in social science and medicine found that those who volunteer monthly or more are roughly 12% more likely to report being very happy than those who volunteer less, or not at all. Those who volunteer weekly are 16% more likely to say that they are very happy than those who volunteer less or not at all. This was true across socioeconomic groups, though when it was compared with studies of how increased income can affect your happiness, the impact of volunteering weekly was like moving from an income of less than $20,000 to an income of $75,000 to $100,000. Like the likelihood that you were going to say you're very happy from volunteering weekly was the same as the likelihood that you're going to say you're very happy by that income jump. It's massive, massive. The mental health benefits of volunteering or taking part in some kind of unpaid work for the benefit of others. And I'm talking about you, Anna Crucis Choir. I'm talking about you, First Unitarian musicians. I'm talking about the small group ministry people, the decarceration team people, the UU the Vote people, the ushers and greeters, and everyone who somehow contributes to making this place possible. The benefits of this kind of volunteering are so well known at this point that a 2021 study published in the Frontiers of Psychology proposed including volunteering as a component of clinical treatment approaches for those who have adolescent depression. Like, in other words, prescribing volunteering as a depression aid. There's this much social science behind how big it is, how good it is for us. Other studies have looked at what that happiness means, whether it's the hedonic well-being sense of happiness or the eudaimonic sense of well-being, which is more like a sense of meaning and purpose. And while people who volunteer, who give something of themselves, say that they're happier in both of those ways, it seems to lean more towards that sense of meaning and purpose, which is different from just the sense of happiness you get from like a really good taco. In a time when so many of us try to find meaning in life by gathering up of our achievements because that's what our culture tells us matters, sometimes even at the expense of our connections to others, these studies are a powerful reminder to me of the truth in that old Winston Churchill saying, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." And for those of you who know a lot about Winston Churchill, he was talking about capitalism versus socialism at the time. But still, that snippet rings true for me, as I know it rings true for many of us. When times are hard, and when money is tight and free time feels elusive, when we are wrestling with our own mental health or maybe other significant issues in our lives, it can feel like we have nothing to give. I know that as like a sleep-deprived parent of an 18-month-old, living on a one-income family while my partner is in school, it can feel like I have nothing left to give, often. And many of you have shared similar feelings with me recently. A sense of not knowing how we can offer something meaningful of ourselves when our well feels so incredibly dry. And so, my friends, I'm saying this morning to myself, and I'm saying to all of you, we need not engage in Herculean feats of quitting our jobs to volunteer full-time or giving half of our income to causes that matter to us. Giving need not deplete us. Giving can feed us. Musicians who are here, guest choir and regular musicians, does your giving feed you? I know that you can be louder than that because you're musicians. Choir members, does giving feed you? Yes. People who've been part of leading small group ministries or being part of small group ministries, has your giving fed you? Yes. People who've served on the board or other weird committees here in this congregation, has that giving fed you? Even the board members say that, my friends. The board is a rad place to be. For those of you who served on, you know what we're talking about. This is a powerful place to serve in some way. Worship associates, I see you, Daryl. Does your giving feed you? Yes. There's two worship associates. Thanks, worship associates. Giving need not deplete us. Giving can feed us. So for those of you who are here this morning and trying to find one small step that you can take to be fed by giving in your own life, I'm going to give you a couple of options here in this congregation alone. I know that there are many other options in your lives. One thing is that you can sign up to be part of our network of care here in this congregation, which is the community of people who help with things like meals for Deborah and Trista, who just had a baby and are still trying to get some support with dinners for another week or so. Signing up with this group can help give you information on how to visit hospitalized or homebound patients like Fritz, who's in the ICU this week and needs someone to hold his hand just a couple times a day for a week. You can sign up to be part of the virtual worship team, make worship accessible to those of us who so desperately need it when we can't or don't want to worship in person for whatever reason. You can sign up to take part in the phone banking or doing other voter engagement work with our voting team. You can sign up to be one of the welcoming ushers here in this sanctuary who offers the powerful ministry of hospitality to those who enter our doors every Sunday morning. And of course, you can make a pledge to any size to this congregation. That matters too. There are sign-up sheets on the back tables of the sanctuary. There's going to be sign-up sheets in the lobby as well if you're going to head into the lunch afterwards. We would love for you to sign up even just for one phone banking opportunity or ushering on one Sunday. And those of you who are here for the first time and are heading somewhere else afterwards, you can be fed by your giving just by calling up a friend who's in need and offering a listening ear, or continuing singing with your powerful choir, helping a family member who might need some groceries this week, offering a cup of coffee to somebody on the street. It's not just empty nester parents who feel the grief of losing those glances of immediate love, that reciprocal love cycle that happens when you feed your child. happens, it's part of what is so hard about losing our loved ones too, even if they've been ill for a long time, and there's a sense of relief when they pass away. When we give of something deep within us, some offering of love from our own hearts without expectation of anything in return, we enter into a cycle of love that feeds the deepest parts of our souls. And so on this Sunday morning, if you are feeling like your well is dry, like I sometimes often regularly feel like my well is dry, my friends, I hope you will think of just one way that instead of retreating, you can give. May each one of us be fed by our giving. Amen, and blessed be.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.